I have seen a lot in my 43 years on the bench. I have watched people lie to my face, cry crocodile tears, and try every trick in the book to escape justice. But I have never in all my decades wearing this robe had someone point a loaded weapon at me in my own courtroom until the morning of February 8th, 2026, at exactly 9:47 a.m., when Police Chief Richard Vandermeer walked into my Los Angeles courtroom and made the biggest mistake of his entire life. You think you've heard wild courtroom stories before? Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change the way you think about power, authority, and what happens when someone believes they're completely untouchable. This story went so viral that it made international news in 73 countries. Let me take you back to how this whole thing started. It was a regular Tuesday morning, and my clerk handed me a file that seemed simple enough on the surface. Case number 2026, TR 8847, a traffic violation. The defendant was Richard Vandermeer, age 52, police chief of Beverly Hills, a wealthy suburb in Los Angeles County. The complainant was Officer Maria Santos, a 34-year-old LAPD officer and single mother of two young girls ages 6 and 8. Now, Officer Santos was not just any cop. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military police officer before joining the Los Angeles Police Department 7 years ago. She worked night shifts, the dangerous ones, the ones nobody else wanted, so she could be home during the day with her daughters. Her oldest girl, Emma, had been diagnosed with leukemia 2 years earlier. Maria was drowning in medical bills, working overtime whenever she could get it, and she never complained.
Right out of the gate, this is a power versus accountability story. When a judge with 43 years on the bench says, "I've never seen this before," that's not casual drama. That's a credibility alarm bell. In legal storytelling, that kind of opening signals we're not dealing with an ordinary misconduct case. We're dealing with ego, authority, and someone who believes the rules don't apply to them. And when power forgets its limits, the courtroom becomes the equalizer.
Not once. Her fellow officers told me she was the kind of person who would give you her last dollar if you needed it more than she did. On January 22nd, 2026, at approximately 11:34 p.m., Officer Santos was working her regular patrol on Interstate 405 when she clocked a black Cadillac Escalade going 97 mph in a 65 zone. She activated her lights and initiated a traffic stop near the Sunset Boulevard exit. The Escalade didn't pull over right away. It kept driving for another mile and a half before finally stopping on the shoulder. When Maria approached the vehicle, she immediately recognized the driver, Police Chief Richard Vandermeer. He was wearing a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Maria made in 2 months. His wrist had a Patek Philippe watch worth at least $80,000. The Escalade he was driving had custom trim and modifications that pushed its value well over $95,000. Maria was respectful, professional. She said good evening and asked for his license and registration, and this is where things started to go wrong. Vandermeer looked at her badge, looked at her face, and said something I cannot even fully repeat here. He told her she was a nobody cop from a nobody department and that she had no business pulling over someone of his position. He told her to get back in her little car and pretend this never happened. Maria stayed calm. She explained that she clocked him at 97 mph and that she needed to see his documentation. Vandermeer laughed, actually laughed in her face. Then he said something that made my blood boil when I read it in the report. He told Maria that her daughter's medical bills must be pretty expensive, and it would be a real shame if she lost her job and her health insurance over making a big deal out of nothing. Let me say that again.
Pause right here. Legally speaking, what was just described isn't just rude behavior, it's potentially witness intimidation and abuse of official position. When a superior officer references someone's sick child in the context of professional consequences, that crosses from arrogance into coercion territory. Ask yourself, if this had been captured on body cam in any other situation, would there even be debate about consequences?
Again, this man, this police chief, threatened a single mother's sick child to avoid a speeding ticket. Maria's hands were shaking, but she wrote the ticket anyway. She cited him for excessive speed, failure to yield to emergency vehicle, and reckless driving. Vandermeer snatched the ticket from her hand, tore it in half right in front of her, threw the pieces out his window onto the highway, and drove away. Maria collected the torn pieces, documented everything in her report, and filed it with her supervisor the next morning. 2 days later, Maria's captain called her into his office. Someone from Beverly Hills had called, someone with connections. There was pressure, subtle but real, to make the ticket disappear. But Maria's captain, Captain Robert Chen, was old school. He'd been on the force for 28 years, and he didn't bend for anyone. He told Maria to pursue it through the courts. He said he would back her 100%. So that's how Chief Richard Vandermeer ended up in my courtroom on that October morning. When he walked through those doors at 9:45 a.m., 2 minutes before his scheduled appearance, I could see the arrogance radiating off him like heat waves from summer pavement. He wore another expensive suit. This one looked like Brioni, probably $6,000 minimum. His shoes were Berluti, maybe $2,000 more. His lawyer walked beside him, some fancy private attorney from Beverly Hills named Gregory Ashford, who specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. Officer Santos sat in the gallery wearing her dress uniform. Her medals were pinned to her chest: Combat Action Badge, Army Achievement Medal, her LAPD commendations. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, back straight, eyes forward, professional, dignified. I could see the exhaustion in her face, the kind that comes from working double shifts and spending nights in hospital rooms watching your child fight for her life. I called the case. Case number 2026, TR 8847, State versus Richard Vandermeer. The attorney stood up and Vandermeer stood up beside him, but not in the way defendants usually stand in my courtroom. He stood like he was doing me a favor by being there, like this was all beneath him. I asked Officer Santos to present her testimony. She stood, walked to the witness area, and described everything exactly as it happened. She was clear, detailed, and credible. She provided the radar gun calibration records, the dash cam footage, everything documented perfectly. When she described Vandermeer's threat about her daughter, her voice cracked just slightly, just for a second, but she composed herself and continued. Now,
Notice how credibility is being built here. Detailed documentation, calibration records, dash cam footage, composure under pressure. In court, facts beat rank every single time. Jurists are trained to look for consistency, corroboration, and demeanor. And right now, Officer Santos is checking every credibility box. If you're the judge, the scales are already starting to tip.
been doing this long enough to know when someone is telling the truth. And Maria Santos was telling the absolute truth, every word of it. Then it was Vandermeer's turn to speak. His attorney tried to do the talking, but Vandermeer waved him off. He actually waved his own lawyer off like he was swatting a fly. And then he addressed me directly, and what came out of his mouth was something I will never forget. He said the radar gun must have been wrong. He said he was only going slightly above the speed limit, and that Officer Santos must have misread the equipment because she was probably distracted thinking about her personal problems. He said this with a smirk, an actual smirk on his face, while a mother sat there thinking about her daughter's cancer treatments. But here's where it gets interesting. Are you still watching? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would do if you were in my position. Would you stay calm? Would you throw the book at him? Let me know, because what happened next will test everything you think you know about keeping your cool under pressure. I looked at Vandermeer and I asked him a simple question. I asked if he threatened Officer Santos regarding her employment and her daughter's health insurance. He didn't even hesitate.
This is the moment lawyers dread, when a client talks themselves into deeper trouble. His own attorney goes pale, and that's telling, because admitting you implied professional consequences to a ticketing officer, that edges dangerously close to obstruction. Here's a question for you. Do powerful people get careless because they think consequences are optional?
He said that he may have mentioned that making false accusations against a police chief could have professional consequences for her career. He said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, like threatening a woman's sick child was just normal business. His attorney's face went pale. Even this expensive Beverly Hills lawyer knew his client had just confessed to witness intimidation in open court. But Vandermeer didn't care. He kept going. He said that Officer Santos should be more careful about who she pulls over. He said that some people in law enforcement have more important things to do than deal with petty traffic stops. I felt my jaw tighten. I've been a judge for over 4 decades. My father was a judge before me. I learned from him that everyone, and I mean everyone, is equal in the eyes of the law. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor or a police chief. It doesn't matter if you drive a beat-up Honda or a custom Escalade. In my courtroom, you follow the same rules as everyone else, but I stayed calm. I asked to see the dash cam footage that Officer Santos had submitted. We played it on the courtroom screen, and let me tell you, that footage was even worse than the written report described. You could hear everything. Vandermeer's tone, his threats, the way he laughed when he tore up that ticket. You could see Maria's hands shaking as she tried to remain professional while this man mocked her and threatened her child. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. Even Vandermeer's fancy attorney looked uncomfortable. But Vandermeer himself just sat there looking bored, checking his phone under the table like this was all a waste of his valuable time. I asked him if he had anything else to say. He stood up again, and this time his tone changed, got more aggressive. He said that he's been in law enforcement for 27 years. He said he's the chief of police in a department that serves one of the wealthiest communities in California. He said he knows the governor personally, plays golf with 2 state senators, has dinner with the mayor of Los Angeles twice a year. Then he looked directly at me and said something that crossed a line I didn't even know could be crossed. He said that I was a traffic court judge who spent my days dealing with small-time nonsense and that I should be realistic about who I was dealing with.
And there it is, the thesis statement of arrogance. People at his level don't answer to people at my level. In constitutional law, that mindset is exactly what the system is designed to reject. The entire judiciary exists on one radical principle: no rank above the law. When someone says this out loud in open court, they're not just insulting the judge, they're challenging the legitimacy of the legal system itself. Would you have kept your composure at that moment?
He said, "People at his level don't answer to people at my level." Those were his exact words. People at his level don't answer to people at my level. The courtroom went dead silent. I saw Officer Santos close her eyes like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I saw the court officers, my bailiffs, who I've worked with for years, tense up. Everyone knew something was about to happen, but nobody knew what. I took a breath. I looked at this man, this police chief, who thought he was untouchable, and I started to speak. I told him that in my courtroom, there are no levels. I told him that the badge he wears is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean service, protection, integrity, not threats against single mothers, not using your position to intimidate people who are just trying to do their jobs. And then, as if the universe decided to write the most dramatic script possible, something happened that nobody in that courtroom expected. My clerk received an urgent message and handed me a note. I read it, and I had to read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. The FBI had been investigating Chief Vandermeer for the past 8 months. Case number FBI 2026.
And this is what we call narrative gravity. When federal investigators have been watching for 8 months, it means this traffic stop was likely just the thread, not the whole sweater. Federal investigations require probable cause, documented patterns, and layered evidence. Whatever this chief thought he controlled, he didn't control this. Stay with this story, because when local arrogance collides with federal jurisdiction, the consequences tend to escalate fast.